Oops. Good evening again. Today is what is it? It's the 4th of May. And we are in round 2 of concentration, the 8th of the Eightfold Path, the 8th step. And the reason I went to a second one with this subject is I wanted to have a look at Gil Fronsdal's suggestions at the end of each chapter. If you've been looking in his book, you're aware, and you may have read this already as well. He has a sort of reflections and practices section, and this is that section in his right concentration. The way he does it is he has suggestions for 4 weeks worth of doing these things. But I'm going to run through them all right now. And of course, they're always useful. And some of them are really pretty obvious, but the question arises, do we actually do these things? Or is it just obvious that maybe we ought to? The first one is called the conditions for concentration in daily life. And he first suggests to bring to mind the time when you felt like you were concentrated in an enjoyable way in some episode of your life. And what would that feel like? What does he mean? And there is the sense of having let go of grasping, of relaxing, of being at ease, of being present as aspects of concentration. I think of a time like that, and he wonders, what conditions tend to bring that into play. Internal, external, those that you seem to have some control over, those that you really don't. And then he says, his suggestion for the week: during this next week, put into place some of the conditions that support a more concentrated, calm, and alert mind. So just take a moment, and if someone said to you, okay, I really want to get my mind concentrated, and I know I need to set the right conditions, what do you suggest? What you might say? And your suggestions might be quite similar to his. He talks about getting perhaps more sleep if you're not getting enough, getting a bit more exercise if you're not getting enough, having some free time. Sometimes free time needs to be chiseled into what seems to be a no free time zone. What are you doing to help yourself relax on a regular basis? And that might be throughout the day. Or you stop if you tend to be sitting at a desk a good part of the time. Do you get up and stretch every so often? Take a deep breath, let go of what you're doing in your mind, relax for even 2 or 3 breaths. Perhaps it helps, he says, to spend less time online or watching TV. And he's suggesting that this be done for a week to really put these things you think might be helpful into practice. And after that week, you evaluate the benefits of the exercise versus the effort it took to put these conditions into place. And of course, it does take effort to find the space in your life to do the things that maybe the conditions for a more concentrated mind, were the efforts worthwhile? So that's one of his suggestions. And I like the fact that he doesn't say, oh, these things will help. He says, try these things and see if the effort is worthwhile. I think it's the anticipation of the effort that sometimes gets in my way. Oh, geez, such an effort to exercise in various ways or whatever it might be. So that was his first thought on that, conditions for daily life. The second week is the experience of concentration. And he says, again, recall times when you've been concentrated, either recently or long ago. What did it feel like? What did it feel like to be focused, centered, or absorbed? And you might have been absorbed in artwork, or you might have been, for that matter, absorbed in work, which you might enjoy or you might not. But nonetheless, absorbed and concentrated. External distractions didn't intrude so much. What physical body sensations and feelings came with the concentration? What was your mind state at the time? Was calm or equanimity part of the experience? Any experience of pleasure or enjoyment? What was your energy level like? Then he asks, right after a period of concentration, how did you feel? To me, that question really has to do with sitting. It lends itself more easily, I think, to putting oneself in a concentrated state and then seeing how it feels. But he also is saying, pay attention during the day when these things happen. And then his next paragraph says, focus on developing concentration in your meditation practice during this week. So we've been looking at concentration as the main subject here for the last couple of weeks anyway. And in our meditation, we've focused more on that than usual, really just kind of staying with shamatha, with calm abiding meditation. And so the opportunity and kind of the suggestion is there to really focus on that, spend some extra time and what's the right word? Diligence, I guess, to do that during the course of this time we're spending on concentration. And you can check right now, is that something that you've done? And perhaps it is. And whether it is or not, it's always available to really focus on developing concentration and meditation whenever we do that. And this calm abiding, really, it's so very helpful if it's a part of every meditation that we do. Many people think of this as what meditation is. But, there's contemplative meditations and meditations on the Four Noble Truths and many other kinds of conceptual meditations. This is non-conceptual. This is experiential. This does not involve thinking. And he talks about, keep your mind on one object, use the breath, perhaps count them. Try to create conditions that support concentration. For example, do something relaxing or vitalizing just before you sit down to meditate. Some people do a little yoga or just some simple stretching exercises to really, kind of get things flowing a little bit. It's funny, to activate the body a bit with stretches and so forth. Here you are, you're moving into something that is calm and quiescent. And yet it really is so very helpful to do something quite active beforehand to bring the energy up and the alertness up so that you don't get into that, dullness that can happen. I feel so good. But you're really kind of, oh yeah, and then you wake up again. So, to do something to activate can be very, very helpful. Consciously put aside concerns and preoccupations. Now that's an interesting one to say that, my mind says, really? How do you do that? Do you take them and look at them and hold on to them and put them over here? To my way of thinking, the act of simply placing the attention on something else, those concerns and preoccupations will begin to drift away. And the mindfulness is, oh, look, there they are again. They're demanding my attention. They're waving their little hands in the air. They want to have these thoughts arise and make sure I'm paying attention. And you know what? They're just thoughts, and I don't need to do that. And I'll simply allow my attention to go back to where I want it to be. Very gently, and just move it back there. As part of the concentration practice, use any feelings, even preliminary feelings of calm, stability, pleasure, enjoyment, or mental stillness as a kind of biofeedback to support further concentration. That is really helpful when you notice, how's my mind? My mind is calm. With this concentration, I'm aware that there's this pleasurable sensation and feeling that I'm having. I'm enjoying this. There's a stillness that really supports continuing the process and adding on to it. In that jhana practice that I mentioned, that Lee Brasington talks about, he uses that. He says, move your attention from your breath when it gets to be powerful enough, this sense of stability and pleasure, on the pleasure, and then use that as your object of meditation. And I'm not suggesting that you do that, but it's using this very feedback loop that I think that Gil Fronsdal is talking about. Week 3. Concentration and the hindrances. Becoming skilled in concentration includes developing wisdom, there's that word, about the hindrances to concentration. Desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, that pair is looked upon as one. Restlessness and regret is the way that Fronsdal puts it. That's also seen as one. And doubt are often listed as the primary obstacles to peaceful concentration. He suggests spending some time considering which of these is most common for you. And reflecting on how you might reduce the power and the frequency of these hindrances in meditation, and in your life in general as well. Continue last week's practice of focusing on concentration during meditation. Notice which hindrances tend to be most common for you in this week's meditation. And that changes over time, but very often in any given period for a week or a month, you get kind of familiar with the ones that arise. Stay alert so you can let go of thoughts connected to the hindrances as soon as they occur. Again, my mind is going, it sounds like you're doing something to, I got this thing, I'm going to let it go. And there is that feeling of opening your hand, but that's one of release and relaxation. And I guess that's a good word. You're placing your attention, you're not pushing anything away, you're just going to what you want to focus on. And other things tend to just drift off. He suggests just before sitting down to meditate, spend a little time considering how you can set aside or overcome the hindrances. And you may have specific thoughts around things that are arising that perhaps are stronger than usual. Um, perhaps you're in a, you might want to check at the moment. I'll just be quiet for a second. And are there hindrances arising in your meditation recently that are frequent visitors that are difficult to simply allow your attention to rest on its object? It's hard to just return there when this hindrance has arisen. So just check them to see if anything is there for you in that regard. It may be that this is what he's really getting at. Is, what happens when you have hindrances that arise that don't easily lend themselves to simply placing your attention back? What do you do? And that's, we could talk a lot about that. One of the things that sometimes is helpful is to say to whatever has arisen, I know that you're important, or that this is important. And I do think it'll be valuable to spend some time reflecting on this and making some thoughts about how to manage it differently. And we'll do that a little later on. That you kind of give yourself the message that there's a specific time to reflect on those kinds of issues, and this isn't it. So that's one fairly simple thing to do that I've done, that I found is helpful to me, and I know others have as well. You may need to say it more than once. The other thoughts that arise in my mind as I read what he just said there, and I'm thinking about it in terms of the hindrances that arise, and they don't really kind of fade off as our concentration stays on our object. And the thoughts that arise in my mind have to do with the kinds of reflective meditations on various mind states, such as using the RAIN acronym. I mean, there are a lot of ways of looking at that, but to recognize what's there, to be completely accepting of it. Doesn't need to be different than it is. To investigate it in whatever way you can, and also to recognize that it's not you. This is the non-identification, RAIN. But that is not calm abiding meditation. That is a reflective meditation on a particular hindrance that might be arising. So I'll leave that one and move along here. Oh, by the way, he mentions in this chapter, he has a book called Unhindered, which I read. I don't remember much about it at the moment specifically, but I remember that I thought it was a good take on managing hindrances. And the last one, week 4, is concentration and wisdom. The primary purpose of concentration, as we said last week, is to develop deep insight and understanding. And he asks, in general, have you understood things better when you were concentrated and calm? Another question you could ask kind of says the same thing. How has your understanding been when you've not been able to concentrate? When things are really all in an uproar and somebody wants you to concentrate on a conversation or something going on in your life, sometimes it just seems to be impossible. That's sort of an extreme version of the other, how is it when you're calm? Over the course of this week, focus your meditation practice on cultivating concentration. When you become as concentrated as you think you will be during the meditation session, ask yourself what perspective on desire, aversion, clinging, thinking, and freedom you have from your current state of concentration. So he suggests moving into a reflective meditation on these questions. What does being concentrated teach you about the choices you can make in each present moment that lead to being caught or lead to being free? And that is what he has to say about that. And I'll go on just a little bit further. He has another chapter after you finish the Eightfold Path. It's called From the Eightfold Path to the Tenfold Path, if you haven't looked at that yourself, which is interesting, I thought. And the two editions are right knowledge and right release. The Eightfold Path creates the conditions for the ending of clinging and suffering. Right knowledge is the insight that triggers right release, the cessation of suffering. And it has to know with knowing firsthand and experiencing through the path the Four Noble Truths, really. Suffering in all its forms, and what it's like as you understand it more deeply. So he's saying, so the knowledge is not a conceptual one, it is a personal experience of what it's like to experience the benefits that concentration brings, which include, from his point of view, greater peace, compassion, well-being, integrity, and spiritual freedom. And let's see if I can say this the way I want to. I'll read again what he wrote here. Right knowledge is the understanding we gain from directly experiencing the absence of suffering. The more practicing the Eightfold Path alleviates suffering, the better we understand that clinging causes suffering. And experiencing the really positive aspects, expansive, peaceful, happy states that come with the absence of clinging makes one more sensitive to clinging when it does arise, even when it's fairly subtle. It becomes, he says, more and more clear that contracting, attacking, resisting, and other expressions of greed, hate, and delusion are painful and cause harm. That's an interesting sentence. Becomes more and more clear that contracting, attacking, resisting, he's saying that those are expressions of greed, hate, and delusion, and that we become increasingly sensitive to them. That's our knowledge, that this knowledge arises that, wow, there really is a difference. And boy, I like the peaceful one. Right knowledge also includes recognizing that letting go of these contracted states and behaviors is reliable and trustworthy. It's not something we need to fear, even if what we are letting go of is our most precious and tenacious attachment to self. Through the mindfulness and concentration factors of the Eightfold Path, right knowledge sees how all our perceptions and conceptions are in flux, constantly changing. And there's impermanence again, that's part of wisdom. With their fleeting appearance and disappearance, they are not stable and thus cannot provide the fullest experience of peace. They can't serve as the basis for a liberated mind. Instead, the basis for liberation is release. That's right release. Right knowledge sets the stage for right release by helping the mind to relax and appreciate letting go in that sense of, it's not this active I'm trying to get rid of aspect, but letting go in the way we're talking about it. Right release differs from ordinary letting go in that it has a bigger and more lasting impact than ordinary letting go. It is a ceasing of clinging so clear that right knowledge then becomes a knowing that is always available to us. So he really sees this as, sounds to me like this is awakening, this releasing. When these things arise that might have really been seductive and interesting and having to do with wanting and so forth, in the same way we're no longer fooled by a magic trick once we've seen how it's performed. The person who has experienced a mind released will begin to see through the tricks of the mind. I'm talking longer than I'm, no, hush. He goes on to talk about clinging to beliefs, interpretations, stories. We don't need to be defined by any self-concept or identity. And boy, do we do that. Just take a moment right now. What are the main self-concepts that you see as your identity that seem to define you? Might be vocational, might be relational. That's kind of very deep, has deep roots, and you respond to people from there most often. And we tend to define ourselves, other people looking at us that way, but and we tend to do the same. We don't need to be defined by any self-concept or any self-identity in that way. And then there's the aspect of really biological drives, I think is the way he puts that. Sensual desire, he puts hostility in there. Even when people know that such clinging causes suffering, it can be difficult to let go. I mean, sensual desire can be of so many things. And, a lot of it's hardwired. Sensual, I'd rather be warm than cold. I'd rather be well fed than hungry. Those kinds of things is there as part of the, survival mechanism in a way. But when we cling to those aspects, they can cause the suffering. Even the wisest of people, such as ourselves, right, can easily succumb to these things. Our strong drives can relax and fade away when something better is experienced. See, that's where that sense of ease can come in. If we really see this really is better than that, then it's fairly easy to move toward what we see as better. But we have to experience what is better before we really see that. Often enough, it is not helpful to be instructed to let go of desire and aversion, he says. Isn't that true? You desire things, you don't like that over there. Well, stop that. Forget about that. Let it go. Yeah, that's a ticket. More useful is relaxing deeply, settling into a unified sense of being and enjoying the pleasant feelings that come with non-clinging. So sensual desire and hostility can then simply fade away. So we're back to that concept again of we don't need to wrestle something to the ground, grab it, throttle it, and say, now I'm in control of you. It's just relaxing deeply, that unified sense of being even to experience that for a little while in meditation, which is available. When we come out of meditation and those same things are there, we can look at them just a little differently. Sometimes very differently, but at least a little differently. The way to final release is to settle deeply into a relaxed, alert state where one doesn't try to do anything. I think the word try is important there. Reminds me of Yoda. Try, there is no try. Do or do not. And in a way, when we're really relaxed at ease and we're seeing what's happening, we spontaneously move in ways that are appropriate and can be quite helpful. And it's not like we're trying to do something. We're just there and responding in a natural way. And he ends here with a couple of things. One, he says, may this openness that he talks about here be a benefit to the whole world. He wants to share the merit here at the end. And then he has a little story about Ananda and the Buddha. Venerable Ananda said to the Buddha, Venerable Sir, this is half of the holy life. That is good friendship, good companionship, good comradeship. The Buddha answered, not so, Ananda, not so. This is the entire holy life, Ananda. That is good friendship, good companionship, good comradeship. When practitioners have a good friend, a good companion, a good comrade, it is to be expected that they will develop and cultivate the Noble Eightfold Path. And I think he says that in more than one place. Friendships in the spiritual life well, what does he say? It's the entire thing. You can ponder that one. And I will bow to you all and see if I can stop the recording.